around you. No, it's just every time I've said hello to someone, they just shot me and stuff. I was trying to extract one time.
Whatever, you could... Whatever. Just go. Hello there, my name is Mr. Moss, and today we are going to talk about my impressions of Ark Riders, as well as how the game uses AI. This will be the perspective of someone who only knew the extraction shooter genre from watching clips. Until now, let's get into it. Ark Riders is a dynamic online shooter from 2025 in which, as raiders, we venture onto the surface of a future post-apocalyptic Earth. It's a classic third-person extraction shooter that mixes PvE, so fighting machines, and PvP, so encounters with other players. You start in one of several available locations and spend around 30 minutes looting on the surface, trying to return to a safe zone before timer runs out or before you die. This builds a unique atmosphere of trust and uncertainty. You often meet other players you can cooperate with, but there's always the temptation to betray them. Let's shoot him. I've lost count of how many times I helped a stranger with my finger on the trigger, holding back the urge to dump a full magazine into his back, or even rescued someone from danger. In recent months, the game has blown up on Steam, breaking records for players and sales, proving that people really want to experience this kind of adventure together. At its peak on Steam alone, it reached 480,000 concurrent players, and so far the game has stayed consistently around 400,000 every day in peak. It actually reminds me of success of Battlefield 6, where the player count was also around that number for a long time and the game was a success right at launch. Both titles were received very positively. At the same time, Ark Riders sparked a lot of discussion around artificial intelligence because the developers, Embark Studios, previously known from the game The Finals, introduced several AI-based solutions both inside the game and in a player communication. This made development easier but also stirred up some controversy. Ark Riders is much more arcade-like than, for example, Escape from Tarkov. You are equipped with the special shield and can comfortably survive several shots, and if you get knocked down you can still be revived if you have a defibrillator. During my first hours in the game I noticed that the physics and the movements feel very enjoyable, from climbing to general shooting feeling. For example, when you start running, your character pushes off with one leg first, or when you turn your camera around, up to a certain angle your character will turn only their head rather than the whole body, and depending on that the movement animation changes. All of this means that Ark Riders could honestly work even as a pure traversal game, at least for me, but we're in a world swarming with robots and players, which creates a constant sense of unease throughout the entire expedition. Thanks to this, every match feels like gambling. You're betting your gear, and instead of cards, your skills decide the outcome. You can stick rather to safe areas, avoiding robots or players, or you can risk losing everything by choosing a more dangerous location where you're exposed to deadly encounters with stronger enemies. Especially since at the start of my playthrough, Stella Montis was full of friendly players, but now I'm starting to see more and more people treating it as a PvP hotspot. And it's most likely because of the burned peanut, but I'm not sure. And even though I usually encountered either clearly friendly or clearly hostile players, you always have to consider a third possibility. Someone pretending to be friendly just to slide a futuristic knife into your back while you're stuck looting a washing machine. What are you doing, Step Rider? This happened to me countless times, not the washing machine part, and surviving one of those betrayals feels incredibly satisfying. Unfortunately, even if you avenge someone and they are still alive, without the blessed defib, they'll die in your arms anyway. But back to the AI. Ark Riders uses AI in several areas. First, the enemies, the Ark machines, robots and drones, don't behave in a standard way. Their animations and movements are based on a machine learning assisted systems. In practice, this means more fluid and natural motion during traversal and combat. Sadly, some people either don't understand how this training actually works, or they misunderstand it entirely. So, as a person who barely passed it at the university, Let me break it down for you. The Guardian points out that the game uses machine learning to improve enemy behavior and animations. They are no longer simple scripted entities, but react to our actions more intelligently than in many other games. Because animating movement is tedious, especially on uneven terrain, and even more so when you have to animate a spider-like creature with 4 or even 6 legs. The developers decided to use reinforcement learning. You probably know these videos where an AI learns how to walk. That's pretty much how the training process looked for Ark Rider's enemies. In other types of machine learning, you have initial training data and also test data from which the model learns. Here they simply set the spider free and create a reward system for it. Every time it makes a correct step, reward. To elaborate, we could say that as reward we understand modifying the weight of a neuron, but we don't do that here. Every time it covers a certain distance, a reward. The harder the terrain or obstacles, the more resources and cycles the training requires. And considering the landscapes of Ark Riders, this took a while. Then, once the robot was able to move from point A to point B on its own, they added more variables. Maybe a missile is coming, maybe there is a container in a way. Robot falls over, no reward. The robot maintains balance, that's taken into account in the next iteration. And after thousands or even hundreds of thousands or millions of these cycles, the robot is finally ready and ends up in the game. Some people got extremely hyped over the AI-controlled enemies, to the point of imagining things that are physically impossible, like robots learning their behavior from match to match. Sadly, that's just a mass hallucination. An AI that learns between matches would consume absurd amount of resources, far beyond what this studio could afford even after the finals. However, there is a chance that analytics gathered from matches might be used by developers to retrain enemies to adapt to new, unusual situations. It definitely won't happen between individual games, but over time players might find the world getting more challenging. It's a refreshing approach compared to something like Assassin's Creed Shadows, where you could literally hide on a roof above enemies and they'd forget that you ever existed. Even before I knew the animations were AI assisted, I noticed how annoying, in a good way, the enemies were. Robots often found ways to reach you that would completely break most games' pathfinding. It really feels like you're fighting an actual drone, not an NPC whose vision cone is pointed somewhere else, so you're effectively invisible. Some might argue that using AI takes jobs from the animators, but let's be honest, there's very limited number of movement combinations a human can animate, and with spider-like enemies in such varied terrain, more organic movement was necessary. In my opinion, this is where AI shines, doing operations with too many combinations for a human to handle manually. Well, that's exactly why speedrunners use bots that test hundreds or thousands or even 100,000 of movement combinations just to find the most optimal route. Secondly, Ark Riders uses AI-generated voices. This is where the biggest discussion began. Some NPCs, usually survivors or based narrators, speak using text-to-speech. The developers admitted that some of the extra NPC voice lines are produced using voice models trained on real actors' samples. Such a feature you can find in 11 Labs, and even you can see it in my video, this one.
That Naughty Dog already released a remaster of this game in the form of a patch, and now they've decided they could make money from it.
Eurogamer criticized this heavily. In his review, Rick Lane said these generated voice lines sound mediocre. On the other hand, the studio says that it isn't generative AI trained on stolen data. Instead, they used real actors, real recorded lines, processed them through text-to-speech to expand the world without wasting unnecessary time. And as a person who works in IT, I think this kind of AI is perfectly fine. You record the essential key dialogue with real actors, then expand side lines using AI-based voices. Obviously, assuming the actors are fully compensated for their work. Because in that case, there's no theft, and this type of game doesn't rely heavily on emotional voice acting. You know, if something like The Dispatch or The Witcher used AI voices, it would be much bigger issue, but I understand why players have become sensitive to these practices. Kind of like Battlefield 6 players after they discovered one of the more colorful skins when DICE revealed new character cosmetics. And a side note, many people noticed that Ark Riders has a pretty interesting proximity chat voice filter. When you speak into your mic in proximity chat, the game can change your voice. It sounds as if you're an actual rider, slightly metallic with modulation.
Hold on, I'm gonna turn it on like audio.
All right, there we go.
Southeast.
Whoa, that was wild.
All right. Hey, Raider.
Because of that, other players hear you differently even though you're speaking normally. The CEO of Arrowhead, another studio, commented that this helps shy people who don't want to use their real voice. They reveal less of their identity while still being able to communicate. In practice, it's like putting on a Raider helmet mask and your real voice becomes a futuristic radio whisper, thanks to AI that transforms your voice live. Ark Riders gives AI room to shine and shows how technology affects gameplay. Maybe with a deeper, more confident voice, other players will respect you more and follow your commands. With a female voice, maybe you'll receive more help, or the opposite, with people trolling you just because you sound like a woman and just because you, well, exist. Often though players choose to keep their natural voice, making interactions feel more human. Another interesting part is player behavior, because despite the risk of betrayal, people often help each other. Reviewers also point out that this differs from a typical every man for himself formula and creates memorable stories. Maybe AI even reinforces that positive vibe. It's a game where robots are the villains and we become better humans. It doesn't need an Oscar tier dialogue anyway. I had a situation which was perfect, but sadly I can't show it to you because my still serious moments failed me. But basically another player knocked me down and I managed to crawl behind the rock. And some player approached, trusted my word and shot the attacker and revived me. Just like that. He could easily finish both of us and just take our loot. So naturally I gave him the most valuable item I owned and left him with the already downed, let's call him Christoph, who was screaming that we were both noobs. How interesting. It was one of the best interactions I've had in this game and I was so sad when I saw that it didn't save. AI in Ark Riders has two sides. On one hand, it lets developers achieve things that would be extremely difficult to do manually and save actors time on minor voice lines. On the other hand, many players expect human sound from human characters and react negatively to anything generated by AI, so controversy is easy to spark. Personally, I take it lightly, because I enjoy the voice filtering feature and appreciate the smarter enemy animations, which make combat feel more dynamic. I'm having a blast exploring the surface, and if you're also playing Ark Riders, feel free to let me know what you think about the game or your favorite story in the comments. And that's all from me. Thanks so much for watching this video till the end. There is like 13% of people who do that, so thanks even more. I wish you a good loot and weak opponents. See you in the next one. Take care. Bye.